I have a very lively, or rather deadly, recollection of a certain series of discourses on the Hebrews, which made a deep impression on my mind of the most undesirable kind. I wished frequently that the Hebrews had kept the epistle to themselves, for it sadly bored one poor Gentile lad. By the time the seventh or eighth discourse had been delivered, only the very good people could stand it. These, of course, declared that they never heard more valuable expositions. But to those of a more carnal judgment, it appeared that each sermon increased in dullness. Paul, in that epistle, exhorts us to suffer the word of exhortation. And we did so. I also recollect hearing in my younger days long passages out of Daniel, which might have been exceedingly instructive to me if I had obtained the remotest conception of what they meant. I remember hearing a sermon from these words: who, passing through the valley of Baca, make it a well. Certainly the preacher did not make his sermon a well, for it was as dry as a stick, and not worth hearing. There was nothing like cheerfulness in it, but all the way through a flood of declamation against hopeful Christians, against people going to heaven who are not always grumbling and murmuring and doubting, fumbling for their evidences among the exercises of their own hearts, ever reading and striving to rival Job and Jeremiah in grief, taking the lamentations as the fit expression of their own lips, troubling their poor brains and vexing their poor hearts, and smarting and crying and wearying themselves with a perpetual habit of complaining against God, saying, "My stroke is heavier than my groaning." I used to hear a minister whose preaching was, as far as I could make it out, do this and do that and do the other, and you will be saved. According to his theory, to pray was a very easy thing. To make yourself a new heart was a thing of a few instants, and could be done at almost any time. And I really thought that I could turn to Christ when I pleased, and that therefore I could put it off to the last part of my life, when it might be conveniently done upon a sick bed. But when the Lord gave my soul its first shakings in conviction, I soon knew better. I went to pray. I did pray. God knoweth. But it seemed to me that I did not. What? I approached the throne? Such a wretch as I lay hold on the promise? I ventured to hope that God could look on me. It seemed impossible. A tear, a groan, and sometimes not so much as that. And ah, would that, but the lip could not utter more. It was prayer, but it did not seem so then. Oh, how hard is prevailing prayer to a poor God-provoking sinner! Where was the power to lay hold on God's strength or wrestle with the angel? Certainly not in me, for I was as weak as water, and sometimes hard as the nether millstone. Once, under a powerful sermon, my heart shook within me, and was dissolved in the midst of my bowels. I thought I would seek the Lord, and I bowed my knee, and wrestled, and poured out my heart before him. Again, I ventured within his sanctuary to hear his word, hoping that in some favored hour he would send a precious promise to my consolation. But, that wretched afternoon I heard a sermon wherein Christ was not. I had no longer any hope. I would have sipped at that fountain, but I was driven away. I felt that I would have believed in Christ, and I longed and sighed for him. But that dreadful sermon, and those terrible things that were uttered. My poor soul knew not what was truth or what was error. But I thought the man was surely preaching the truth, and I was driven back. I dared not go. I could not believe. I could not lay hold on Christ. I was shut out, if no one else was.